truffle hunting, which he does have truffles here, but we took a little bit more of an abundant spot in Sheridan, just down the road. And that season ends towards the end of March. And then our black season goes about until May. So we did find some black truffles yesterday. And if you have a chance to see them, they're really cool, completely different notes than the white truffles. But the whole relationship with the truffles and all the plants around here is really amazing. And there's some cool books about it, but still somewhat undiscovered. There's still so much to be learned about truffles.
Yeah, the other thing that's amazing is just the relationship that you're able to cultivate with your dog as you're out truffle hunting, and the forest that you're able to see that practically nobody goes into these forests. And here we're exploring and finding truffles, but we're also finding deer sheds, mushrooms, which there's somebody that's going to talk about mushrooms and stuff. But it's just a really incredible experience when you're out there and experiencing nature in a way that not very many people are able to experience it. And then at the end of the day, you come back home with, gold in your hand and just the aroma of the different truffles as you're digging. You got to experience it where it kind of hits your nose as that shovel hits the ground or the dog's paw hits the ground. This black truffle rich smell hits your nose, and it's just, there's nothing like it in the world. And the dogs are so incredible that they can go, there's a point in the season, depending on the rain, when it really hits, but there's actually white truffle is peaking as the black truffles are on, and the dogs are able to go between, get a white truffle here and a black truffle here and go between the two. And it's just a really incredible experience to get to see the dogs do that in their, do what they're bred to do. And I don't know, it's just, you have to see it to really know what I'm talking about. And actually, I think Scott has a video.
Yes, I do. Sorry, I'm just working on all sorts of logistics, right?
Yeah.
So you guys take people out, right? And do this?
Yeah, so we do guided truffle tours, and when you leave today, you'll get a card. So we do take groups out, and our white guided truffle tour is like January through March, and it's super flat, so friendly for anybody to hike around on, and it's a gold mine. He calls it his office.
Yeah.
So, and that's where we took Scott.
It was unbelievable. I mean, I was thinking, man, we're gonna be trudging around, all day. We're gonna find a truffle, right? It was unbelievable. As soon as we got there, Petra is like the superstar. Some of the other guys, they're a little maybe more kind of, hey, what's going on? Petra's like, bam, and starts digging. I'm like, oh, look, she's digging like our dogs do. But when she digs, there's a truffle. Yeah, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, literally, you have to run around because she's getting them so fast. Because she'll dig them up and eat them.
Yeah.
So they're running around and hold her back with these truffles. It was amazing, and we were at the tail end.
Yeah.
So I was at the part where it was like,
it wasn't as
okay.
amazing as usual.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. So I'm gonna play. Hopefully, this thing will play. There we go. There we go. So this is our outing. There's the dogs. So they came up and started digging, and now they got these spoons out. Highly technical tools. Still operating. See it right there? Starting to come out. And what's amazing, so how I made this oil. So I'm like, okay, what do I do to make this oil? This stuff's like gold, right? When you get it from Italy or whatever. So I kind of have a little bit to do with self. We're kind of guy. So I went and bought an aquarium bubbler, those little things. I took a piece of Tupperware, put the aquarium bubbler, because I didn't want to just dump the truffles in there because they're in dirt and stuff. I stuck the aquarium bubbler in there, sanitized the stone, put it into the oil, bubbled it for a day and a half, and voila, it is truffle oil. It's amazing. So the guys at the winery have been kind of on me a little bit, because when you put a truffle in your fridge, everything in your refrigerator is truffle.
Everything.
Yeah, so I went home, the first ones I put it in the fridge, and the butter, great, good deal. Milk, good, except for maybe breakfast cereal, started maybe, I don't know about that. The pie, I don't know, maybe that's maybe taking it one step too far. So anyway, those truffles, it's unbelievable. I mean, I could set a truffle there and I would be smelling it, even with the room wide open like this, with this ventilation that we're providing. It's amazing. So highly recommend, if you guys are interested. It's a cool event. It's a cool thing to do. These guys have a yurt over there that they rent out too, right? Or can you do that?
Well, yeah, we're in the process.
In the process of that?
The other cool thing that Scott isn't mentioning that is so amazing what he did is in the 40s, in 1941, scientists learned how to synthetically create truffle oil, and it's actually fake. So when you get fries from Burgerville, it's not real truffle oil, it's fake. It's just a synthetic
Scientifically made.
scientific taste. And so what you've created is, and when you infuse things and stuff, it's the real deal. So this oil that you're getting today is truffle oil that we harvested the truffles and did it. So it's a pretty thing that you did.
Yep, very cool. So highly recommend, take a card, give them a call. They're awesome people, they're fun. It's just a good time. Thank you, appreciate it. So, St. Patrick. So, welcome, thanks for coming. So, the reason, again, why truffles are pretty special is one thing I really love about Oregon Pinot Noir is all the food and all the bounty that we've got from the valley, right? Within 100 miles of here, we have the most amazing food on the planet. This is just another little piece that I got now, right? In my arsenal of truffles, to shake that on with truffles. So we're going to give you, as you guys leave, one of the little takeaways is we're going to give you some truffle oil to take with you in a little bottle. It's white truffle oil, and use it as a finishing oil. Don't cook with it because it just totally blasts the truffle away. Put it on right at the end. So you have your Wheaties, put it right on after the end, right before you start eating. So where they're really great is, first thing I did was I made mushroom risotto the first night with truffle oil. It was so good. Sprinkling on some popcorn. It'll totally change your life on popcorn forever. Anything that has fat in it, so a little bit with butter, anything with fat is where it really shines. That brie cheese that's on there, so what I did is I stuck that in Tupperware for a day and a half with the truffle in it, and that's what got it truffly. So what's cool about this is, again, that truffle is a symbiotic relationship with Douglas fir roots. So it has to be a Douglas fir tree for a truffle to be in existence. That is the fruit of the fungi that is a symbiotic relationship with Douglas fir roots. So that's the fruiting component of the fungi, is what that truffle is. So much like all of this relationship we're talking about. So the other thing about truffle and Pinot Noir, come on, man, so good. It's got truffles, you get that kind of, it's funny because people have asked me, well, how do you describe the smell or the taste of truffle? And I go to, it tastes like truffle. It's got kind of a garlicky, it's got some of this kind of savory kind of tones to it. And it's a little bit of when people ask about Pinot Noir, what's Pinot Noir like? Well, Pinot Noir is like Pinot Noir. When we try to associate, we try to get fancy and talk about all these different things, and it's kind of like, but truly, what Pinot Noir and what the truffles are, is they're about that place where they came out of the earth. That's what that grape is about too. So what we're doing now is we're going to talk about our first two wines. I did this before where I talked for like a half an hour before anybody wines. Everybody loved me. Oh yeah, the first one. I should talk about the first one. So what we did have a wine on the way in. You guys should drink it up, or we maybe have a dump bucket if you don't want to do it. That is our 2019 estate Chardonnay. So this is our first ever Chardonnay that we are going to be releasing next Friday. We are doing a pre-release on it as well. But it is off of our new block. It's all Dijon clone. So I was always this guy like, I'm never going to make Chardonnay. Hate Chardonnay from Oregon. I've had this stuff. It's not great. And then I had a Master Davies Chardonnay once, and I was like, shit, I'm going to try Chardonnay because it was so good. So so we're trying to make Chardonnay now. So what this is it's I'm trying to keep the light and the brightness of Chardonnay. One of the really cool things about making Chardonnay that I'm just starting to realize and understand is Chardonnay is a winemaker's wine. It's about winemaking more than it is about place. And that's maybe an oversimplification. Where Pinot Noir is all about where it comes from. It's all about time and place. Chardonnay has a lot of the hand of the winemaker that comes in as to what you're drinking. That's why Chardonnays go from those big, nasty, buttery things to these super light, bright, steely wines. So that's because it's this big gamut of what you can do for winemaking. What I wanted to do was I wanted a rich Chardonnay. I wanted a deep Chardonnay. I wanted one that would live for a long time, but I love acid. So what we did is we made actually half of it in stainless steel, and that's how you create a wine that has, simply how you create a wine that has some brightness and acidity to it. And then I did the other half in a big oak barrel, so 500-liter oak barrel. So it's about twice the size of a normal barrel because I did not want oaky. I didn't want that big, buttery, oaky thing. But what happens is when you ferment Chardonnay in barrel, it rounds it, it richens it. So then I had these two components that I could deal with, right? I got this steely, I got this rich, and then I got to blend them together to where I wanted them to be. It ended up being about 80% off of that big barrel and 20% off of the off the stainless. I thought that it gave me that idea of that richness of a Montrachet kind of idea, along with that brightness that I just think Oregon white wines are all about. So hope you enjoyed it. That's my first try. So that was good. So anyway, then we're going to pour our first two blocks of 2018 block Designate Pinot Noirs. So our block Designate Pinot Noirs are off of our 4 older blocks. We have Brunel's block, we have Sarah Jay's block. The 2 first ones you're going to get are Abby's and Tallulah's, named after my 2 daughters. And the whole idea is, again, Pinot Noir we talked about as a time and a place. These wines, hopefully you're going to see that there's a very unique quality about all these 4 wines. Even though they're from the same vintage, and Abby's block is here, Callie's block is right there. They're reflecting on each other. One's kind of southeast facing, one's kind of southwest facing, both mainly south. They kind of reflect off each other, but they have very, very different personalities of these wines, in my opinion. And that's why we bottle these separate to get that personality, show you about how Pinot Noir is about time and a place. They're much like my daughters, where they have very separate personalities, even though they come from kind of generally the same place, right? And the same upbringing, I guess, but unbelievable. From the day they were born, they had different personalities. And these wines actually share their personalities, Callie's and Abby's. The wines are very much like the girls, which is kind of interesting. I just get into that if you want. So we try to make our white wines. We do Pinot Gris, we do some Riesling, we got some other stuff. We have some rosé, all sorts of different things. Come back, and we're only focusing on these wines today. Come back if you want to try these other wines. We try to create white wines of vibrancy. We try to create our red wines about place, that our wines are coming from somewhere, not somebody. So hopefully when you taste the wines, you're not tasting my hand in those Pinot Noirs, because I try to be as non-imprinting on it. I try to let the place show through. I'm gonna keep going. So 2018 was a magic vintage, man. This was like our best vintage we've ever had. So these wines that you're tasting are amazing. And I don't always say that. I believe, wine, the old joke is like, when you ask a winemaker what his favorite vintage is, it's the one they're pouring. So, but I really try not to do that. If you guys know me, I'm not like this shield guy that, oh, that's the greatest thing ever, and the next one's the greatest thing ever. 2018 is really special. It's got vibrancy, it's got brightness, it's got depth. Clearly our best reviewed wines that we've ever had. It's pretty amazing kind of reviews that we had. It's pretty cool to see. As our vineyard gets older, as I get older, as we kind of learn each other and figuring each other out, I think that's got something to do with it. And these are the wines. So the one on your left, I hope you guys mostly have to so. The one on your left is going to be Tallulah's Run. got here. Hopefully can you guys remotely hear me? I hope still. It's all good? Okay. So Tallulah's Run is off of the block, as you're seeing over here, west, southwest. It's made up of 2 contiguous blocks, the south kind of facing. As you came up the road, as you turn that corner off to your right was Tallulah's Run, the bottom of Tallulah's Run, and then it comes up here to the top of the road here. So a pretty long block, and it actually has metamorphic soils, which is pretty cool. So we have both volcanic and sedimentary soils in this property, lots of exposure elevation. That's why these wines are so different. This wine actually has the most volcanic influence of all of our black designates in it, and it tends to have this bright, light, a little bit more kind of cheery wine, I guess. It's the one that comes and hits you right in your face right away. It's the wine when we first release it. It's always the first one to really show well. It's the one that walks in the room and lights it up. That's my little girl, Callie. She walks in the room and she lights it up. And she's just, you know, in your face and happy, and that's just what I get from Tallulah's Run. I highly recommend take some of this the brie and the truffle oil, dunk it in and try it with it because it's very cool. And see how that interacts with the different blocks. Because one thing I think you're going to see is, on some of these blocks, you know, Pinot Noir, earthiness is a characteristic of Pinot Noir. It's certainly a characteristic of the Corte Pinot Noir. You're going to see a little bit more of that come up with some of the other wines versus, you know, different ones. Where Tally's, I think, is a little bit more kind of bright cherry. It's maybe won't get that earthiness as much. So yeah, southwest. I think I covered it, right? 94 points, not bad. Okay. So I got a little thing on Oregon truffle, so I think I might have covered most of this. Yep, I did. So I already covered this slide, but here's the actual truffles cut away, which I thought was kind of cool, a black and a white truffle, which is kind of neat. You just take, you know, when you clean them up, the best thing to do with that white truffle when it's fresh is just to shave it. On top of that risotto at the end, a little bit of shavings of it, it's just magic. Good stuff. Okay, so the next block is on your right is 2018 Abby's block. Abby's block is that enigma block to me. So when I first moved here, you know, kind of the traditional slopes where the greatest Pinot Noirs come from are somewhere around 400-foot elevation, south to southeast facing. You know, and that's kind of like where all the Grand Cru Burgundy blocks come from, is that spot. So when we moved here, I'm like, that block right there, that's the one, Abby's block right here. South-southwest, 400-foot elevation at the base, mid-slope, should be perfect. The first 5 vintages off of that were disappointing. I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, how am I so wrong on this, right? Like, I thought I knew everything. So, if you ask my wife, she'll say that was the most true statement I made all day. And it really took this kind of enigma kind of thing. In 2008 was really another great vintage in Oregon. I didn't make an Abby's block in 2008 because I just didn't think it didn't meet the parameter of what I thought this wine should be, of what this level of wine should be. So I didn't make it. And then 2012 came along. And it's funny because all of the other blocks were this kind of instantly showed what they were. And then they just kind of continued to kind of show more depth and more nuance. Where Abby's was kind of like, on the bottom, all of a sudden it was like a hockey stick. Like suddenly in 2012, it went from, you know, 0 to hero. It was amazing how in 2012 was just, it lit up and it just showed this depth and this nuance and this texture component that I was shocked. I'm like, how it happened? Oh my God, I wasn't so wrong. It was interesting. Chuck probably knows a little bit about this. So it was very, very cool. So and since 2012, it's been showing this depth. One thing about Abby's block, it's not our first wine to show usually real well. It usually takes time in bottle to start revealing itself. It usually is our last one to age and start showing the bottle. Pinot Noir and the way we make our Pinot Noir, they get better with age. They get better with time. Certainly the first 5 years is a big, big difference from when they're first released to 5 years from now. These wines are just going to be, open them up and they're going to have that kind of truffle experience, right? Where it just fills the room with this smell. So it's going to be pretty amazing. I'm loving to see the way these are going to react. But Abby's just showing that depth and that layers. And again, the more I get to know this wine, the better I like it. And that's how it's like my daughter Abby. When she comes in the room, she's not that, you know, in your face, like a little bit like Tally. She's a little quieter. But then you start talking to her, and she's got this depth of knowledge, which is just ridiculous. I mean, she'll go from like neoclassical art to skateboarding to Beatles trivia to whatever, and amazing depth. So that's where Abby's block is like Abby. Whereas you get to know her more, there's more depth and more as you see the revealing of the depth of the person. So that is our lines. Complexity, south, and that's this block over here. So it's south to southeast facing. Doesn't get quite as much afternoon sun, which I think lends to the delicacy. It is sedimentary soil, 100% sedimentary soil. We did have a geologist come out here and said he's never actually seen the soil before, which is kind of cool. But in the Coast Range, we have this very huge, we can get into dirt and like crazy, but because we're so far close to the coast and all this part of the world was under the ocean at one time, this has got so much in geology with the Missoula floods and all the volcanic stuff that's happened and this uplifting of all this marine seabed. We have a huge diversity of place in our place here. So and that comes through in the wines. What do you think? Wine's pretty good? Okay. Sean, you're down. So I'm going to introduce Sean. So one thing we try to do on Earth Day every year is not just have to listen to me droning and on, is we get to listen to Sean drone.
I hope I'm entertaining.
So Sean, what we were talking about is mushrooms. Mushrooms are a big deal in how they can ultimately maybe save the planet. There's a lot of stuff we can do. We're big into this regenerative farming and what we can do to prevent some of the bad stuff that's happening in our environment. Mushrooms are a very key component of this kind of ecosystem or this biome that can make this work. So a good friend of mine, Jessica Ensworth, is my partner, and said we're on a call and I was talking about this stuff and she goes, Sean does this stuff, my partner, and I'm like, this is awesome. So that's where we got a hold of Sean, and Sean's going to talk about this. He's into mycelium. I'm going to let you introduce yourself for the most part. And so you guys enjoy the wine while he's talking. About midway through his presentation, we're going to stop and have some more wine to fill it up. And so we keep you guys wanting to go. So enjoy.
So I'm Sean Duncan. I've been studying fungi since I was 17 years old. I've had multiple classes in fungal cultivation as well as remediation. I studied at college with mycorrhizal fungi and the potential for plant seeds to transfer mycorrhizal fungi in the seed. I also am super interested in the ability to clean up oil spills with fungi, kind of my jam. But I think the whole thing is important and pretty interesting. So I'm going to give you kind of an overview of fungi and how it can change the way you think about the plant you live on, because you are more associated with it than you think. So we're going to start with basic. So in science, there's lumpers and there's splitters, right? There's people that say these things are alike, and there's people that say these things are separate. We're going to kind of go from a lumper perspective and split it down as we go through this presentation. So we're going to basically say we have saprophytic fungi and ectomycorrhizal fungi. The ectomycorrhizal fungi work on the outside of the tree roots, like a sheet for the roots. They open up the space for fungi to, or for plants to absorb minerals and nutrients, especially ones that don't translocate very well. So there are some minerals that move around in soil pretty well, and there are some that are pretty stuck. Well, mycelium stretches beyond the outside of the roots in a large way, and it transports those to the roots of the plant. Now, the saprophytic fungi decompose dendritis or dead stuff on the top of the soil, and they transfer those nutrients down into the soil. Let's have the next slide. Sorry.
Touch you.
I can only yam on so
I'm making sure the remote gets there you go.
There we go. So 80,000 species of mushrooms are known, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. There's another 1,700 species every year that are being turned into the nomenclature. But we can start to go from lumping with just fungi into splitting, right? We already talked about saprophytic versus mycorrhizal, and now we go, there's fungi perfecti and fungi imperfecti, right? So the fungi perfecti are your classic mushrooms. They have a mushroom fruit body, that makes them perfect. Now imperfecti doesn't do that. That's also what made your wine and your cheese. Molds, mildews, the things that we see on the tops of the plants, that's all in the imperfecti category, because again, no sporulating fruit body. This is fun. So 70% of the diseases in plants are caused by fungi. That's definitely a problem in the vineyard. It's something that we work on very hard to ameliorate. We're actually more closely related in the tree of life to mushrooms than we are to plants, which I think is pretty fascinating. We breathe oxygen and exude carbon dioxide. Fungi do too. Fungi are actually kind of closely related to spiders because fungi digest on the outside of their bodies. They produce an extracellular exudate on the outside of their filaments that breaks down the leaf litter and the, especially saprophytic fungi, breaks it down, sterilizes it against other fungi, and then starts to absorb the nutrition. Spiders kind of do the same thing. When they bite, they insert a venom, and that breaks it down, and they kind of suck out the juice like a beverage through a straw. Some fungi infect bugs, and those are the cordyceps. We're actually going to go into that. We also talk about those, I think, in the literature. They're calling them zombie fungus. We'll get into that in a minute. It's pretty cool. Fungi are a big problem with bananas. I'm a big banana lover. I eat banana a day. But unfortunately, as of last year, fungi has been found in the Panama disease, has been found in Americas. It actually was located in Guatemala on a 200-acre, hectare plantation, which they immediately burned. It's a big problem elsewhere in the world. So we're going to go into prototaxites because it's super cool. It's probably the oldest true mushroom we've ever found in the historic record. Mushrooms don't preserve well, because they're just not designed to do that. But we have some evidence of prototaxites, and I'll show you pictures of that. Super interesting. It's even thought that in the rainforest is actually a rainforest because when mushrooms sporulate, it dumps so many potassium salts in the atmosphere that they cause nucleation sites for water droplets to form. So we actually owe our rainforest potentially to fungi. And then the other weird one is Vladimir Putin paid almost $100,000 for less than the troubles it took to make your truffle oil. I mean, 2 ounces is like this much, right? All right, here we are. So this is fun, right? We have the archaea, we have the single-celled eukaryotes, algae, meat, plants, awesome, fungi, and then us. So plants, algae, fungi, and us. That's kind of interesting. That's our relation. So there are fungi that are symbiotic in ways that we don't really classically understand. So in the classification of fungi, right, you have saprophytic, mycorrhizal, parasitic. And so saprophytic means it decays dead wood. Parasitic means it decays living wood. Mycorrhizal means it works in conjunction with the roots of other trees, right? Well, these are actually symbiotic in a different way. We've all seen lichen, right? That's actually part fungi. It is a fungi fused with the cyanobacteria that actually allows it to proliferate the way it does, or an algae. So the nice thing about this is fungi, the mycelium is sticky a little bit, and it's one of the ways that we really want to use fungi in remediation of soils, which I'll go into in a little bit. But the fact is it's a true partnership. Fungi is producing the way for it to stick to the rock. The powerhouse, which is the cyanobacteria, is producing the sugars for the fungi, and they're in complete homeostasis. None of it takes the other. A true living polyculture, very, very rare in the universe, or at least on a planet.
It's rare.
Look at it.
For the United States?
Yeah, right, seriously. Yeah, very hard to stick together on that level. All right, so this is fun. This is the zombie fungus, right? So this is cordyceps. Cordyceps has a bunch of different forms. When it's on ants, it's called militaris. When it's on larvae, it's called senescens. But it's really interesting. It causes massive problems in this ant when it gets infected, and it takes over its mind, and it makes it crawl to the top of a tree and lock its mandible, lock everything around the end, and then the mushroom fruits out of the back of its head and sporulates to the top of the tree line as a part of its propagation strategy. Super creepy. Super creepy.
Good thing you're so tiny.
Okay, prototaxites. Look at this. This is what prototaxites look like. This gigantic thing. So this is from the Devonian period, 3.6 million years ago. They've been found everywhere from Quebec all the way to Saudi Arabia. The images in this thing is a carbon abundance, and this is a cross section scanning electron microscopy. So this indicates the high levels of the carbon, which didn't come from the fungi, that came from plants. So what this meant was it was one of our primary decomposers of plant litter way back in the way back. The trick is this thing used to be gigantic, and the biggest plants we had in that era were about that tall. It wasn't even thought of as fungi until like 2001, which finally got classified in that strategy, and we really started to understand where our fungi perfecti really came from. Okay, let's split some more, shall we? We have white rock fungi, brown rock fungi, parasitic fungi, and mycorrhizal fungi, right? So white rock fungi degrades cellulose. Trees are made, degrades lignin. Trees are made of lignin and cellulose. That's how tree rings are formed. That's why when you see white rock in a tree, you know that the tree's got to come down or it's going to come down on something. Brown rock fungi degrades cellulose, which is super interesting in sort of the environmental standpoint, because there are a lot of cellulose-derived things that need to be degraded. Parasitic fungi break down living tissue. We talked about that. Mycorrhizal fungi break down or work with conjunction with tree roots. So the largest living organism on our planet is the mushroom. It's 2.7 acres. It's in the mountains, the Blue Mountains down in southern Oregon, and it is a parasitic fungi. It eats living trees. It is called the honey mushroom or Armillaria melia. This is a picture of it. It is also delicious. Little soy sauce in this, an absolute treat. They think that this fungi is almost 9,000 years old, and it is eating the top of a mountain. Want to see it?
Yeah.
Wow! That is something special. That is the biggest organism on our planet.
Single organism.
Single organism. You can take a fungal sample from right here and a fungal sample from up there, and they are exactly the same DNA.
Where's that at?
That's in the Blue Mountains. I don't know if that's that. Yeah, way down there.
Need to go there.
Well, more like down there in California.
Oh.
Yeah, southern. Yeah. So think Bandon and then like 200 miles that way. So let's split one more time, shall we? There's Basidiomycetes and Ascomycetes. Basidiomycota have a sporulating body that comes from a gill, and Ascomycetes don't. Have you guys ever seen morels?
Yes.
They don't have gills. How does that work, right? Well, that's Ascomycota. You ever seen a cup fungi coming out of a carpet in a bad restaurant? Little white
I don't know.
Well, I do. I'm a mycologist. We go everywhere. All right, so pretty interesting though. When we look at the sporulation form, basically comes down to basidium. It's a gas pack with, and this is how you do mushroom identification through microscopy. You have a gas pack. It has between 3 and 6 little ports on it. The spores grow on the top. The pack fills up with gas and it ejects. The force that it ejects with, the initial force, is the same force that the space shuttle takes to leave our atmosphere.
No.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the only things up in the stratosphere that we find are mushroom spores. The other thing that they found besides space dust on the moon were spores. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
Then you have the Ascomycota. So the asca is more like a straw, filled with single mushroom spores. And then as that goes, the first one ripens and it falls out. And the second one ripens and falls out. So the strategies for these two different types of fungi are completely different. One is a fallout and one is a full ejection. That's why sometimes if you take a mushroom and you're hunting mushroom and you're up in the sun, you flick it, you'll see this huge dust cloud come out of it because you caused all of those sacs to pop. All right, so mycorrhizal fungi, endo and ecto. Endo outside, or endo being inside, ecto being outside, correct? So we have two different kinds of fungi. When you see this right here, you have an ectomycorrhizal fungi that lives on the sheath of the roots. There are endomycorrhizal fungi as well. They actually live inside the cells and the organelles, that is those right there. They transport those noble nutrients and they produce something called glomalin. And glomalin is what we want to talk about because glomalin is a soil stabilizer. Glomalin is dirt glue. And it's one of the things that really helps using fungi in runoff situations or where you have slope problems because it'll actually stabilize the soil just by on its own right. It will keep that from happening, which is pretty cool because we definitely have problems, with topsoil erosion. Well, this is the solution here. They also store nutrients and they also protect the roots from other fungi. If you have a root sheath that is completely enveloped in fungi, well, you have a natural, basically a defense system. All right, fungi and packaging, right? In our search for more earth-friendly ways to package materials, these guys, as 4 years ago, have come up with it. They basically, and you guys are gonna get a mushroom bag at the end, you're gonna be able to see the mycelium in the bag. It's grown on straw, it's grown on organic oat grains, or not oat, rye grains. When you hold it, you can feel the structural component. As your mushrooms fruit, which they will for you, when it's all said and done, grab that bag and try to bend it, and you'll see that it has developed a rigidity to it that it did not have in the beginning. It was just straw, and the straw was even been sheared, so it was like just little pieces of straw. So these guys now are doing this. They basically take all the waste products from the ag industry, they build a form with it, they insert the mycelium. 3 days later, boom, they have this, they dry it out. What's neat about that? Fungi is made of chitin. Chitin is the same thing on your peel and eat shrimp. You know the part you don't eat? That's what it's made of. So that is naturally fire resistant. These things decay in 3 months in the right conditions to soil. So that's super cool. All right, mycological cascades. Now, there's a series of events that happen when you use fungi, right? When you do, there's bacterial load that happens as fungi goes through its senescence, it dies, the bacterial bloom. Now you have a secondary thing happening there. You have bugs that eat fungi, that transport mycelium around, they transport spores around. The biological cascade of organisms that comes after that is amazing. That's why it's so neat in remediation. Let's say that you have an oil spill and you remediate it with fungi. Well, you still kind of have dead dirt, because it has mushroom stuff in it. Well, then you have bugs come, and bugs like fungi, right? So they eat that. They've got other microorganisms on them. Birds come eat the bugs. What do they have? Seeds, right? So now you have this whole thing that's happening because you use fungi in the first place. Nature, you use the catalyst organism that caused nature to take over and actual remediation to happen. We are not the only person or the only species that grows mushrooms. Leaf cutter ants. You ever heard of these? Probably seen them on the TV and stuff. They don't eat leaves. They eat mushrooms. They take the leaves down there and they create a fungal bed for an organism called termites. And they eat the fungi, not the leaves. They also transport the fungi. The fungi and the ants have a biological symbiosis where the fungi underground sporulate and have hyphae on the ants. That's all this white stuff that causes the ants to become the inoculation tool. So as they pick these little bits of leaf out, as soon as they cut them, they're infected with the fungi. Fantastic. Ants are by far and away the largest organism on the planet, aside from not single organism, but like 70% of the world insects are ants. So this format for this symbiosis is absolutely fascinating. How did these guys get in association? Where did they learn to grow mushrooms? It took them 10 years.
Okay, we're gonna take a little break and we got some other wine coming. So Sean's coming back.
I'm
So,
gonna
it's pretty amazing stuff, right? So the one thing I did want to one thing that we're doing is we're actually, because of the symbiotic relationship I was talking about, Sean and I are actually going to do some trials down in Rennell's block where we're going to, he talked about the mycorrhiza as one of those entities. That's the entity that works in symbiosis with the grapevines to help it uptake. We're going to do some inoculating trials where we're going to inoculate parts of the vineyard. We're not going to inoculate others. We're going to take the fruit. We're going to identify it all separately. We're going to see what that all does. So we're going to continue this whole idea. And ultimately, if it works, we're going to be taking that throughout the whole vineyard and continuing to do that. But you can buy the mycorrhiza, and he's kind of a do-it-yourself too, kind of like that with bubbling that oil. We're going to create this little injector thing. We're going to have a tank of it on our back. We're going to just jam it down in the roots and see what happens. It's going to be pretty cool. So I'm very excited about it because what also that does, one of the big issues that we're starting to deal with in Oregon is water and vines being able to remain healthy throughout the growing season. One of the, there's this notion of grapevines is that they're supposed to like super struggle, right? That they, these struggling vines create this really great fruit. And that's true to a certain extent. It's really great fruit until it kills the vine, right? Then you don't get such good fruit. So the whole idea of that super struggle is probably overemphasized a little bit. You want it to be having to work for its day, but you don't want it to be working so hard that you're in this kind of death mode. So water is becoming an issue. We are getting into the cycle of having less water during the year. One of the things we did a long time ago is we put in drippers, which I'm very, very happy we did. Because I can always choose not to turn the water on, but if it's super dry and they need water, I can go down and just switch and away it goes. We get all our water from the pond that you guys see down there. And I really believe that that's something that's going to be more and more prevalent in Oregon. You hear people talk a lot of times about dry roots. We dry farm. Nobody dry farms. Everybody in the valley is getting rain today. Nobody dry farms. Don't believe that. Because you have to have water. It's just a matter of when you get it and how you get it. So, and water's water. There's no magic to rainwater versus drip water. So anyway, we're going to now try the next two blocks. So we had the first two upper blocks. Has everybody got? Okay, so we're pouring that right now. As we're pouring our two oldest blocks that were kind of more named after family from the back, from further back. So Sarah Jane's block is named after my wife's great-grandmother, who was a full-blood Chickasaw Indian, and kind of the matriarch of her family. And so we've dedicated each of these blocks to a matriarch of the family, and somebody that has been special to us. And Sarah Jane's block was planted in 2000. Before I get into the wine, though, I've been remiss thinking. I'm always terrible at this. So I want to first say, we have a number of club members here, and I really, really appreciate you guys. Thank you for being part of the winery, and it's really important to have that kind of longevity. I was telling you guys, and you were saying talking about 2007s. It's pretty cool, right? I'm like, wow, you guys have been here for a long time. So I love that. So thank you guys for all that. I want to say thanks to Jock. Jock worked with me for many years. He's an awesome kid. We all love Jock. I know he's embarrassed when I do this. But thanks for coming. It's really cool that, the one thing I said, Jock, you can retire, but you have to come back and help me, and taste the wines and give me your feedback because it's super important. So he's graciously agreed to come drink our wine sometimes and give me his feedback. So I appreciate that. And thank you for all the new folks and the folks that have come. Yeah, that was the easy part, right? So, and thanks all the new folks for coming. People that have either been here a few times or heard about us, and we really appreciate it. We love it. Thought about the club on that at some point too, coming into that zone. So anyway, thank you guys on that. So let's get back to the wines. Sarah Jane's block. Sarah Jane's block was planted in 2000. It was our second block planted. It was our first block that was planted by the vines that we grafted ourselves, which is kind of cool. So Grapevines, as you probably know, are all grafted onto rootstock because there's a thing called phylloxera that eats vinniferous roots. Will kill it. It's a little aphid-like creature. Actually, a lot of people talk about mycorrhiza and things like that can mitigate the effects of phylloxera, but we planted on rootstock. And our first block, Brunel's block, which is our next wine, we bought those vines. But then kind of in that do-it-yourself mode, I've got a Scottish background. If you guys know Scottish people, we're cheap. That's just what we are. And I was like, my gosh, man, these vines are $4 a piece. And then I got my spreadsheet out. Okay, I want to plant 40 acres, 1,700 vines per acre times 4. I was like, wow, that's a lot of money. So I had a friend of mine teach me how to graft vines. So the rest of the vineyard you see were all grafted by us in that little greenhouse that you saw down there. First year we did 12,000 vines, about 10,000 of them took, and it cost me about 98 cents a piece. I'm like, that's a pretty good deal. So we planted off of those. What turned out really cool though was, if you guys are in the Pinot Noir, everybody talks about clones. It's a big kind of discussion point. What I found was these clones that were supposedly the same vine were growing different fruit. And then I read this book about Massal selection from France. This idea of the way vines were originally propagated was the vineyard, the vigneron would look at the grape and go, oh, I like that. Sorry. They go, oh, voila! So, and then they take that and stick it in the ground, and it would grow, and that become, the dude in Pomard who did that, he'd stick it in, and that became the Pomard clone. So what I do is I'm like, look, I'm crafting my own vines. I don't need to do it by Pomard. I don't need to do it by 115 and do this kind of scientific approach. We can look at our vines and say, that's the vine I love. And that's what we did. We started cutting those vines, we grafted them ourselves, and planted the rest of them throughout the vineyard. So the rest of these blocks are what's called a Massal selection, which means it is a big variety of vines that are planted, of many, many different clones of the vines I liked. What's cool about that is when you taste the difference of these wines, it's not because one's Pomard and one's 115 and one's whatever. They are uniformly non-uniform. Right? So randomly uniform. I don't know. So they are all this melange of plants in all these vineyards, but they're equally random. So you're not tasting clone, you're tasting complexity because there's this depth of differences in it. But when you taste differences in these wines, it's because they came from a different place. I try to make them very similar, so it's about that place. So Sarah Jane's block. What I get from Sarah Jane's block every year is it's got this kind of cane aspect to it. This I always, probably if you heard me before, you'll say, oh, here he goes again. It's that picking blackberries. Like when you're picking blackberries, you're grabbing that fruit, you're stepping on the cane, right? And you're digging through green leaves as you're tasting the super ripe fruit. And that's what I get from Sarah Jane's block, is that cane brambly texture along with that super ripe, darker fruit tone that comes from Sarah Jane's block. Sarah Jane's block is all sedimentary soil, probably our most classic vineyard soil that would be seen throughout the Willamette Valley. It's a wine that I think really ages really well. So we tried to make all of our wines here. There's a lot of fruit in these wines in 2018 though. I'm getting so much more fruit than I usually do at this point of their release. It's almost like kind of shocking how lively they are, because we usually get a little bit more earthy spice from the wines. So that's kind of interesting.
I have a question.
Yes, please, and ask questions.
How do you think the fires are going to affect your yield?
Oh, the old fire question. I can tell you how it's going to affect 2020. There's not going to be a whole lot of Pinot Noir. So we were on the edge of the fires where the smoke was coming in, and smoke is amazing. Smoke, what happens with smoke is the grapevines and the skins will actually translocate that smoke and bind it to sugar, and it binds in the skin of the grape and binds that flavor, that smell. So there is a real concern about that aspect of it, and so we did some trials last year. We were right in. We didn't have as much smoke as like the further east you went, the worse it got. But it was still, orange skies and ridiculous, and we couldn't go out. It was terrible. I actually did some pre-ferments. We did a lot of analysis. See, there's actually a chemical that you can test for. What you do is you pick a bunch of grapes, put it in a 5-gallon bucket, ferment it, send in that wine, and you test it for what's called glycol. That's the chemical that you're looking for. We were literally on that threshold number that came through. And so we could have made a lot of wine off of it, but you have to follow a whole different kind of process of the way you make the wine. And then I'm like, is it really going to be our wine at the end of the day? So I would highly encourage you to buy a lot of our rosé this year for 2020, because we did make more rosé. Because what happens is that glycol actually, it shows, it leaches out over about 4 days, and that's where it starts peaking. And it doesn't come out right away. So rosé, the way you make rosé is you put it on the skins for like 4 hours and you take it off. You don't get that smoke. The other pernicious thing about this is the smoke is actually, there's 2 different ways. There's glycol that's bound and there's glycol that's free. The free stuff you smell right away. You put it in, I didn't get any smoke taint smell. But then a lot of it's bound up in sugars that release, and guess what releases the sugar, that boundness? Alcohol cleaves that bind. So after about 9 months in the fermenter barrel, away it comes. So I didn't want to take the risk because again, so it's the same kind of idea with like 2008 Abby's Block. Great vintage. I could have sold every lick of it. I could have made that wine. People would have bought it because it's 2008, but it wasn't the right thing to do. So we didn't do it.
Okay.
So there won't be a lot of 2020s.
Okay. Thank you.
But luckily we got 18, 19, and 21 coming. So yeah, so we always err on that side. We really try to err on that side of trying to do the right thing for the wine. Not, you know, I got the worst business model in the world probably. You know, but the accountants would tell you. Luckily it's us, so I don't have an accountant to say you got to do something. So we didn't.
Could that have been made into a port or something?
So the smoke's going to be there. I mean, there's just no way around it. You can try. There's all sorts of things you can do. There's all sorts of chemicals you can add. There's all sorts of machines you can throw it through. But then it just becomes. I could have made it into like ethanol for burning in the tractor.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. But then the problem is I got to pick the grapes.
Right.
So then I got to pick the grapes. I got to pay $250 a ton, to pick the grapes. And now I'm starting to throw, and they give me like $50, for that ethanol. So I'd be starting to throw more good money after that. So, but this year's gonna be great. No smoke this year. So that's the other piece of like farming is I grew up on a farm. I'm a farm kid. It's like actually kind of I don't like any of that stuff, but you really have to become like almost zen with it. Like, you do what you can do. You do the best you possibly do. You grow really good stuff, and only so much of it is up to us. The rest is up to like Mother Nature and God or whatever you want to apply it to. And so we do the best we can. We try to make good wine from it, and it is what it is. I actually think it's a really good lesson. I hope my daughters learn that lesson that you only have control of so many things. You do the best you can, and then you got to be very happy with what you did. So.
Yes.
Has anyone made wine out of smoke affected grapes?
Oh, all the time.
Has
California's got a whole industry.
Yeah. Just like
What's that fact?
Is it necessarily bad?
yeah.
Well, so it's just not. So I can tell you, you're not going to get wines that are not manufactured. You cannot. So you can manufacture wines, and most wines on the planet are super manufactured. They're like. It's like making Coca-Cola, right? They're putting it through the process, they're putting it through the machines, and it comes out the same ingredients. They'll put a vintage on it, but I have no idea why, because it tastes the same as last year, it tastes the same as the year before that, because they have manufactured that wine to do that. And you can do that with smoke can wines. You can put carbon in it, you can reverse osmosis it, you can put it on a less extractive, you can add enzymes to it, all this different things. There's tons of protocols you can do. You cannot make great Oregon Pinot Noir that way. Cannot do it. And I would argue that point with anyone to the end of the day. Because the only way great Pinot Noir can be made is when it's coming and showing its place. And every time I do something, every time I add my input to it, I'm extracting a little bit of that out of it. It becomes more about me in the process versus the place. And every time I do that, so I really, as a winemaker, I always say we are hands-on in the vineyard, super hands-on. We're touching that vine 15 times a year. We are trying to make the right decisions. Once it comes to the winery, I try to be as hands-off as I do as little as I can to let it be what it's going to be. But yes, you can do it. Like I said, there's a whole industry. Literally, California gets smoke tainted almost every year. And that's where all these protocols come from, because they've really worked hard on trying to make, because you got to make wine, right? For if you're a business, and that's kind of all you do. We're smaller, so we don't always rely on that, you know. We don't have shareholders and all that kind of stuff. So
It seems like a big write-off to lose the whole crop.
yeah, it's a bummer, man. It's a big old bummer. There's no doubt about it.
Farming, that's what farming is.
So Matt, by the way, another guy I forgot. Matt and Linda are our Pinot Gris growers. So they grow Pinot Gris right over there, and Pinot Noir. And Matt got his first introduction to the beauty of throwing your grapes away after.
It was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It was for an adoring of wine, I mean grapes. It was heartbreaking. But, you know, after you get over that shock, you just, it is
Move
what it is.
on.
I will tell you though, in South Florida, there are some winemakers around the valley that are pretending to discount. So we can't. You gotta put wine. Don't buy cake.
And they probably can make good wine. I'm not going to judge what anyone else. I'm not going to judge what anyone else does. I mean, they can do whatever they want to do, and you know they've made it affected differently. Everyone has their own decisions to make. So far be it for me to judge anyone else.
So you were saying that you left the berries on the vine, you didn't harvest them. Is there any benefit? Do you see any change the next year in the harvest? Is it affecting vines at all?
No, because they've gone through the whole process. They were right. I mean, it was actually the shade was a really great year. I mean, from a growing perspective, the grapes were just tremendous. Yeah. They were beautiful. They were small berries. They were not a huge crop set. So what ends up getting is you have a very small yield. So there's lots that we're like throwing away, but small yields give pretty good quality because they have small berries too. And so what you're getting is more skin to juice. So you have more of the grape berry is made up of skin, which is where all the flavor is. So it really won't affect it this year. But you know, the vines, we try to get them so that we are thinking about the next years, the next 10 years with these vines as we're farming them, so that they're healthy. We're making decisions all the time. You see, like, we talk about tilling. Why we don't usually till our vineyard, but we did this year because of competitiveness with the grass. So we're trying to keep them healthy early in the season when they're competing. So, yeah, I don't think it'll make a difference this year. Okay?
Scott?
Yeah.
If I could go back to when you made the decision to use your own grapes to propagate and ignore clonal selection. How many people have done that approach before you, or where did you get the idea, and what was the ultimate decision that you made?
So it was multi-level. So where I got the idea was there was a book called The Great Domains of Burgundy. It was a really awesome book by an English writer, and he goes through 100 different domains of Burgundy, really in depth, viticulture and vinification. Every last one of them were saying, oh, before we had phylloxera, we did LaSalle selection. We had this great diversity in our soils, but we can't do it anymore because of phylloxera. We have to get rootstock. And I go to the next one, the guy said, oh yeah, we love LaSalle selection was the thing. I'm like, there's a theme here. And then it hit me. I'm like, I'm grafting on vines. I can do that. And so it was that kind of idea of like a couple things. Number one, it's the $3 a ton. I'm not going to deny that was a big piece of the puzzle. But it was also that quality of things. We try to be very traditional, and it just seemed like, man, it's something we can do ourselves. It's super traditional. We can take those vines. It's something people aren't doing. Because at that time, in 2000, it was all about clones. And we were super scientific. We knew that clone 115 was giving us a cherry. I'm going to put 3 rows of that. I'm going to put 777. It's going to be some spice. And it's like, I'm going to gin up this wine exactly like I want based on clone. It's a bunch of okay. But that was our, we were so scientific, we got this thing all nailed. And, and that never quite felt right because that just became more like, we it just always hit me as like, I think we're thinking we're too smart right now. You know, like we're smarter than, you know, we're not this intelligent yet and figured it out. So that never felt quite right. And now that it's actually called multi-clonal planting now, it's a big deal. A lot of people do it, or they'll go and buy planted in a block because they're seeing that whole idea of block and plant. If you plant it one clone, you get this kind of monolithic picture of it. But if you plant 8 different clones, the ones that have kind of evolved here, it has a bit more kind of nuance in life and death. Yeah, of course. Oh yeah. Yep. So Mike's a great guy. He's an awesome dude. Okay.
But it's still all, you got it all mapped out though?
I can't tell you which vine is what. Actually at that point when I made that decision to be multi-clonal, I left the idea of being able to tell you what clone it is. And I'll say what clone it is. It's Cordyceps clone.
That's
You get one that you like from over here and don't like the rest of the row that much for your grafting.
I'm cutting that vine. We tagged that plant. So Rinell's block though, I can tell you what it is because that was planted by grapes we bought, and I do have that mapped out. 8 different clones of Pinot Noir in Rinell's block that we bought from Duarte Nursery.
Do you see any difference in ripening?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yep. So that's the argument against. That's the argument against it. Is you get this diversity of ripening in a block. I'm actually okay with that. I think this unilateral ripening again is the idea that Pinot Noir should just be 100% ripen in your face. Is not what I like about Pinot Noir. I like Pinot Noir that has depth and layers and a little bit of savory, which is kind of associated with maybe less ripe fruit, is fine with me. I have no problem with that. That's our water jumping off the in there. I don't have a problem with that actually. I actually think that brings nuance and character, and I like that. So, but that was clearly the argument. The single argument against it is that unevenness.
So you have to be really good when you're sampling.
You have to look through the block, not just take 3 plants. You have to look through the block for sure. Yep. Any other questions? So Rinell's block is the next one. Oh, I went the wrong way. That's not Rinell's block. Thanks for the questions, by the way. This is great. I love when it's interactive. It's much more fun than me just like going on. So thank you. So Rinell's block is our oldest block. This is named after my mom. It's the mother block of the vineyard. We did take a lot of these cuttings originally off of Rinell's block. It was planted to 8 different clones of Pinot Noir. Homard probably being the primary one of more than any. Homard's that kind of taste of Oregon, in my opinion. That's that kind of meaty, a little bit bigger, rich Pinot Noirs is a Homard clone. So now I'm going to talk like I know all about clones, right? So Rinell's block was planted in 99. And the reason we planted there is funny, is the reason we planted Rinell's block in 1999 was we lived down in the little house down at the bottom of the hill. And that was the block that was right there that we could look out at. And I could see our work. And also I actually thought it was this kind of clay soil, which wasn't traditionally, it's called cassolaire. It's actually been renamed, but at the time it's called cassolaire soil. And it's wasn't traditionally thought of as being this great Pinot Noir soil. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to screw up the first block, I'll plant it there. It's less far to walk from the house. I can see it, and I'll screw up that first block. And it instantly came out of the gate this monster and awesome. And I was like, holy cow, this is great. This is going to be so easy. This great thing. These guys talking about being tough. So in 2002, it came out and it was just lights out. So actually next year, Earth Day, we'll probably have some 2002 because it'll be the 20th anniversary of that wine, which will be pretty cool. Come to think of it. Jock wants to come. And it was really great. Jock's probably had some 2002. Yes? Yeah, so they're getting old, right? So they're starting to get old. But that was the first wine we ever made here. And it was just out of the gate, this big, monstrous Pinot Noir. And Rinell's block has always been this big, depth of Pinot Noir, this almost blue fruit tone to it that I get every year. Has it? People have asked me so many times, so really, how much Syrah do you put in there? I don't put any Syrah. I put 100, our wines are 100% Pinot Noir all the time. Unless it's our Syrah, then I put 100%, well, actually, some Viognier Syrah. That's a different story. All of our Pinot Noirs are 100% Pinot Noir. They're all 100% from the place they say they're from. I don't know how much you guys know about the laws, but I could legally put 10% other varietal into my Pinot Noir and call it Pinot Noir. It would not be Pinot Noir. If I put anything but Pinot Noir in my wine, it's not Pinot Noir in my wine. So we are 100%, we always are, always have been. We're 100% organic, always have been. And so we're very, very particular about that. But this wine has got that blue fruit characteristic, which is associated with Syrah. And I've had so many people ask me, come on. Yeah, just tell me. I won't tell anybody. So it doesn't have it. If I put our Syrah in this, by the way, it would make it lighter. Our Syrah is much lighter than Renel's Fungi. Tess have this depth. It's named after my mom, who was pretty amazing. She kind of gave me this idea that there's nothing you can't do if you put your mind to it. So that's kind of why we named it after her. Was this crazy idea, and so that's what it's named after. So and it always has that depth and that structural component. Hopefully you're seeing the differences on these wines and that difference of place. The cool thing is, one time, I think one birthday we did like a vertical and horizontal, where you taste like this year. So this is all the same year from these different places, different wines. But it tastes like Renel's block now as a horizontal, right, through the years, or vertical. Sorry, this is a horizontal. Through the vertical through the years, and it tastes like Renel's block every year. Even though it's different, it's got its own vintage, but you can tell it's Renel's block. You can tell it's heritage. It's pretty cool. So, with that, that's our Renel's block.
That's what I love about it too.
Where's your Syrah grown?
Syrah is right up, so as you came up, that starting is right above that.
How old is it?
It's 2005. And it's super unique. Green. It tastes like, so Jacques would never let me tell my descriptors of it. Because I always say it tastes like iron to me. It's got this iron smell, this ferrous smell, and kind of blood.
Well, in 10 years.
It's awesome, like raspberries.
Renel's has like meaty.
Yep, a little bit of a meaty. Yep, that's that Syrah. And so that's the other thing. Syrah is all about that meaty. Cool climate Syrah is meaty. I mean, it smells like a piece of raw meat. I love that. So, okay. Well, we're going to get back to the mushrooms. You guys ready?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening.
All right, let's talk fungi, shall we? One of the neat things about fungi, as we kind of get further down the road with it, is that we have figured out how to harness it to remediate polyaromatic hydrocarbons, or some of the constituents that happen in oil spills, creosote problems from old railroad yards. Pretty exciting stuff. I got some certifications from Paul Stamens, who is the founder of Fungi Perfecti, an organization that is also commercial but also scientific. And one of his things was to use the oyster mushrooms that are actually going to be the same type of mushroom that you're getting in your oyster or in your mushroom bag.
As a takeaway, when I talk about truffle oil, you're also going to get a bag of mycelium in straw. That's going to be oyster mushroom mycelium that's going to grow.
Yeah, you can get an oyster mushroom kit at the end of this too. So same fungi actually is used by Paul to with Mattel's Science Laboratories and Washington State Department of Transportation. Remediating soil, they had almost a 99, it was like 98.7% remediation. They took it from 200 parts per million down to 2,000 parts per million of polyurethanes hydrocarbon, which actually meant that the soil was no longer contaminated by the standards of the EPA. So white rock fungi again uses those same extracellular exudates to break down lignin. And when you look at lignin as a chemical structure, and you look at oil is a chemical structure. They look fairly similar, so it's the same thing. Basically, you can trick the fungi. You take it into a lab, you put it on a petri dish that's nutrified, and you slowly denutrify the petri dishes as you go down the line, and you add oil. And the fungi will, because it's so evolutionarily, it evolves so quick and it's so strategic, it will evolve the enzymes to break down oil instead of the lignin. So we're looking at this right now as a way to actually heal our planet. So 96% of the polyaromatic hydrocarbon PDHs, that's huge. Now, the other thing is 64% of dioxin was broken down. The other parts of the dioxin were actually uptaken into the mushrooms themselves. One of the things that's hypothesized is that you can come by after the fact and harvest the mushrooms and then put those into a bioreactor to remediate them all the way. You basically pull them out of the soil and into the mushrooms, harvest the mushrooms, put them elsewhere, and finish the remediation. Very exciting stuff.
What kind of a time frame are you talking about?
3 months. Fast. And the other thing is, it's not like bioremediation, right? So let's say you have a biological organism that will remediate, right? We have tons of bacterium that do that. Bacterium don't move. Mycelium run. See them moving? I mean, this mycelium started here and then ran down, right? So when you put them in the soil, if there's oil and they're adapted to find it, like a truffle dog, they'll go for it and dig it up.
So
Very
that's
cool
being
stuff.
land-based.
This is another interesting thing. We're talking about topsoil, right? Topsoil erosion is a big problem. I mean, it's a really big problem. Over here, we're really lucky. We have a lot of water, we have a lot of grass. There's lots of things to keep things in place, but ultimately, it's not the case everywhere. I mean, even on properties like this, which is nicely sloped, you've got to have a spot that gets some runoff, which is going to pick up something. I mean, there's no way around it, right? Water, transport stuff, that's what degrades mountains, right? So in this, we are looking at not only the way that mycelium run, but the glomalin that is attaching all of these things on top of the fungi itself, which is filamentous, right? Which means that basically it has its own structures that hold it together. So if there's anything that it is growing on, those things are stuck together too. So not only is there glomalin in the soil, but then the mycelium themselves create a web that holds things together as well. They can also act in a super wide range of pHs, so you don't really have to worry about that. I mean, we're talking from like 4 to like 9, which is a huge pH range. Yeah, and then all these other amazing components where they interact with plants. I mean, it's pretty fascinating stuff. Let's see the next one. So let's think. 300 square miles of mycelium per square foot in a healthy ecosystem. If you lined up them cellularly, cell by cell, that's how long that is. That's how much fungi there is when you're walking around in the forest. That's insane, right? So this huge network that's taking communicating with trees via the sugar dump that the tree's getting it, the nutrient uptake that's given back to the trees. There are also some studies that show that when trees get wounded, they send the same signals through the mycelium to other trees in the forest. So maybe this is like the original internet. I mean, this is the forest internet. I mean, this is the thing that tie our world together, really. Again, like we talked before, they breathe oxygen, they outgas carbon dioxide. What are the plants like? Stomata open at night, right? They're dumping out oxygen, they're sucking in carbon dioxide, and they're carbon sequestration units. So this is actually helping that. Again, we talked about them moving around, they move through the soil, and then the insects are this wonderful vector, right, that are transporting them, because fungi can procreate 2 ways, right? They can either procreate via spores, right, sexually. It's the same with grapes, right? So grapes will grow vegetatively, correct, right? They grow in the spring and they vegetate. Well, and part of the reason you want to stress the vine is because you want to trick the plant into thinking it's not going to be successful procreating vegetatively. It has to turn to procreating sexually. It has to create a seed. Then more plants, right? So as you stress it, it thinks, oh shoot, well let's make more fruit and disseminate our genes these ways. Same thing here, right? So that insects can take a piece of fungi and accidentally transport that filament somewhere, and if it's the right environment, that will grow. It's the same way I created your mushroom bags. I have those on grain, I sterilize the straw, I put the straw and the grain together, and that cascade happened. And then again, this is what we're talking about. Our thing, we can flood the soil with these mycorrhizal fungi to help all of these things happen. Erosion ferment, uptake of nutrients, uptake of soft nutrients, unlocking of nutrients, moving immobile nutrients in the plants. Very cool stuff. All right, so here's where the cutting edge is very interesting because Oregon just legalized psilocybin mushrooms, right? Michael Pollan has done books on this. The Health Sciences Universities looked into mental health. They've come out with studies as of 5 days ago that say that the small dose psilocybin is every bit as good as the best antidepressant on the planet. And these are our fungal allies from long before we had anything called real medicine. Also medicinal mushrooms. Medicinal mushrooms are anti-cancer, anti-tumor, immunopotentiating, liver tonic, kidney tonic. We've seen the studies from this could fill rooms. I have read most of these studies myself. It's amazing. The beta-glucans that come along with this and the sugars that are created with this have amazing reactions, especially people going through chemotherapy. They actually ameliorate some of the negative effects of chemo and make chemo more survivable. I have helped more than a few people with custom mushroom tinctures that are dealing with cancer, and they are all still alive. Wow. Mushroom mycelium, our universe. Any correlations? Interconnectedness. If you looked at the city, at any city at night, it would look like this. If you looked at your brain pathways, it would look like this. Let's look at that. Let's go to the next one here. This is your brain. This is mushroom mycelium. This is mycelium from research that I did at Portland State when I was doing degradation of polyaromatic hydrocarbons. This is an oil dot. This is a remediated oil dot. It goes clear when it's done. This is your brain on mushrooms. Oh no. Fungi and folklore. Now this is fun. You know where Santa came from? Maybe Andy Hysteria. You've all seen it. It's the classic mushroom, Mario Brothers mushroom. Red mushroom, little white dots on it, right? Crazy. Reindeer eat these mushrooms. They are mildly hallucinogenic. Don't eat them, they're bad for you. Seriously, don't do that. Reindeer then fly. After eating the mushroom, right? Then Santa has the exact same get-up going on. I don't know. This is also crazy. Benjamin Franklin's commemorative medal called Libertas America. We have a psychedelic mushroom called the Liberty Cap, right? Yeah. It is growing out of the back of his head. Isn't that nuts? And then this guy, William Hogarth, is carrying the cap of liberty. And it is obviously a gigantic mushroom. Who knows? I don't think they talk much about it. And then I think we have a wonderful video. Please watch this. These are some of my mentors. These are the great people of mycology in the world, and this is a beautiful presentation. Please enjoy. Wait for it.
World Internet.
Wait for it.
My mission is to discover the language of nature, and I believe nature is intelligent.
There is a world under the earth, full of magic and mystery. It holds the consciousness of nature's connection to all living things.
You know, these mushrooms, they can heal you, they can feed you, they can kill you.
Not like a vegetable, and it's not like an animal. It's somewhere in between.
They support life, they nurse life.
You're walking barefoot 300 miles of fungi under every footstep that you take, and that's all over the world.
The bulk of the organism is growing underground, and it's composed of these long threads called a mycelium.
Almost everyone knows about the computer internet. The mycelium shares the same network design.
It's amazing what we don't know about mushrooms. They really are a frontier of knowledge.
You can filter water, you can create medicinal compounds almost on demand.
They have incredible capacity to make things change very quickly. So I am super hopeful.
The psychedelic members of the mushroom kingdom are fascinating.
I have been a guide for around 350 psilocybin sessions.
The most glorious part was that it made me feel more comfortable with living because you're not afraid of that.
We need to have a paradigm shift in our consciousness. What will it take to achieve that?
We can heal the planet. We can build the future. And our world is fantastic.
Little plug for the movie, if you haven't seen it, you should, it's amazing. Thank you guys so much for being here.
All right, so again, questions, any questions, anything further? I hope, yeah, I can count on you.
Definitely. Are there tips for us growing mushrooms once we take this back home?
Oh, yeah, so then you'll get a sheet with the whole thing of what to do, that Sean has put
Oh, I
together.
would say this, it's not on the sheet. If you decide to leave it out, because we have about 6 days of the perfect weather for leaving and staying outside. There's one hole on the mushroom bag. That's where the mushrooms are fruit out of. If you leave it outside, you can accidentally drown your fungi this way. Just take a sharp, clean knife and pump a couple of holes in the bottom so the water can drain, and you'll be fine. But yeah, there's instructions on it.
So we need a copy of this presentation.
Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is we got all your emails, and I'm gonna send that out. We recorded this presentation too, and I'll send a link for all of that, for sure. Yep.
I'm also available to talk. If anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer.
All right, well, so I hope that you see our wines are about a place that we're thinking more than just, this is a product. That's really not what we think of this at all. We think about this as really a reflection of us and our place and what we try to do. And I really appreciate you guys. It's 2 hours of mushroom and talk. So I really appreciate you guys hanging in there for that. I want to thank everybody for who presented. Sean, the McFarlands, thank you guys. Pretty amazing. Do that truffle hunt if you guys are around. It's just too cool. And we really appreciate it. One thing with the COVID deal, we're trying to make sure that we don't get a big rush to the exits. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring by the mushroom kits, and we have a bottle of truffle oil for everyone to take home. So we're going to bring that to the table. If you guys want to choose to bring wine home at this time, we'd love to do that as well and add into those kits. And for the folks who aren't club members, if you chose to go today, there would be $35 per ticket. That would be because that's the discount that our club members got that you could apply to apply. So the folks will talk to you about that if you want. So it's a pretty good deal. Whole lot going on, guys, under the soil. A lot of stuff. Be kind to your soils. Don't till them. Don't rototill ever. Kills your soil. Don't ever do it. Be kind to your soils. Think about what's going on before you dump something onto the grass. That 2,4-D is just terrible stuff, man. A few weeds are a badge of honor. Tell your neighbors that is a badge of honor to have that dandelion growing because it means you're being kind to your place. So anyway, thank you guys for coming. We will be around. Again, we're going to start from the outside in, so I'll get you more wine so you won't be bored. So, thank you all, and I'm here too if you have any questions, let me know.